Whew.
Okay,
All right.
so also, what do you think? And I don't know if this title is going to be sufficient because I named the title OpSec, and I'm realizing that a lot of chatters, including myself, either aren't familiar with this term or maybe weren't until recently, and maybe they need a little bit more. So,
Should
do
we
you
go
think
clickbaity? Just be like how not to get infiltrated by the police.
how to prevent a cop hack?
How to stop fuckeries?
No. I don't think that's
I feel like it's going to cover a lot of topics, and we'll get to it in a second. But like, I feel like one of the most clickbaity thing we could go for is that it is a way to. One of the things it will stop is undercover cops getting in your org. So
how to prevent police infiltration.
Yeah, that's great.
Whoa.
Wow. Holy shit.
Uh-oh.
That's some real shit. Yeah.
And for the lawyer watching this back through later, this is just a clickbaity title.
That's all we're doing with other clickbait.
Stuff.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I agree.
Shall we start the episode?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Yep.
I'm ready to learn.
Sick. So, previously on Red Planet, we talked about how to keep your comrades safe at a protest or riot, and undoubtedly we will talk about it more in future. Last week we talked about housing insecurity and the inevitability of a mass squatting movement as the housing market does what it'll do and shits the bed. A big focus of the show is generally mutual aid, because systems that exist under modern capitalism are falling apart, overflowing, getting shut down, defunded, sabotaged, or simply disappearing. And this is a show about how to keep each other safe. So this week we're talking about how to organize safely and keep your organizing from being hacked, attacked, or infiltrated by fascists. This week we're talking about OpSec and InfoSec. There we go.
I love that. That was a great intro.
Aw, thanks,
I still don't know anything about it other than just like try not to get fedded.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we go straight to guest, because I feel like there's
get her in.
Okay, so our guest this week is the lovely, powerful, knowledgeable Tia. She's great. She's a pal of mine. And I actually interviewed her for organizing interviews as well. So if you want to see this all in a little bit more of a structured interview format, that's on my channel. It just came out today. I forgot to push the public button on Friday. It should have been out a few days ago. Anyway, this is Tia, and she's very, very knowledgeable.
Hey,
Tia!
Hello.
Can you hear us? Great.
Yeah.
Howdy.
Hey, I'm going to quickly fix everything. Hi, Tia.
So I've introduced you by saying that you're very knowledgeable, but I should probably add on that you have nearly 8 years experience working in naval intelligence, right?
That is correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So very knowledgeable.
Well, primarily, actually, to be clear, I was on loan and working for law enforcement purposes. So that's important to note, yeah.
So Muel was just asking what the flippin' heck OpSec even is. So
what's going on with it? What does it mean?
You're gonna have to do a lot of schooling today.
Okay, so operational security is the behaviors that we take on in order to keep information that isn't secret out of enemy hands. So like, you know that you and your buddies are going to go to a protest on Friday. You don't go out Thursday to the bar and talk about the protest a bunch, right? Because then everybody who's in listening distance, they hear about the protest. They know it's going to start at 4 p.m. They know that there's going to be, 15 to 20 people who are committed and possibly up to 20 more who are like maybes and et cetera, right? And this is stuff that somebody who wishes to harm our movements would be, it would be of interest to them, regardless of if it's actionable or not. It might be the key piece of information they don't have to that allows them to. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and that makes sense.
And then InfoSec is the other half of this, and to a large extent, none of the activism that we've seen in the last few decades has needed InfoSec, because there's no centralized group which commands the sort of practices which require secrecy, but many of the uh, techniques and things that are important for infosec end up being important for sort of evading surveillance in like, either illegal surveillance, which happens all the time, even though they'll say it doesn't, or legal surveillance of people who aren't doing any crimes but who've been authorized as surveillance targets, right?
Yes. Okay, I actually know what you're on about now, because I've heard on It Could Happen Here, Chelsea Manning talk about this stuff, I think. And she
I know
said,
she talked about it on the It Could Happen Here daily, yeah.
yeah. And she was talking about stuff like, like we were talking about it with Anansi a couple of weeks ago as well, where like, the you want to be like the nobody, right? You want to be just like the plain guy kind of thing, just in general. I guess I don't really know, like, what the benefits of doing that on a day-to-day sort of life is, but I guess if you're going to be going to protests regularly, you want to, like we spoke about, having a set of clothes specifically for protests, right? And don't use them for anything else, kind of thing. Yes. I don't know if that would fit into it.
That is actually like something in OpSec is the habits that we keep that make it easy for us to be like for an analyst who's like devoted, like their 9-to-5 job is sitting down and looking at every piece of information about you that's been gathered and trying to figure out what can be inferred outside of that information. And like, if you find out somebody's email address, most people's email addresses are linked to every bit of their social media, and so you can very quickly search out every social media account they have, and then every social media account they have has names and aliases, and oftentimes they'll have names or similar names and then pictures that are spanning across, and so you can be like, okay, it's got a similar name but the same picture, or the pictures are the same themes with instead of like Joe Biden, this was Jay Biden with a similar looking person in the picture. We can assume that's the same person. And so basically every single person I know, like I don't know anybody, including myself, who's actually went through and done the work to make sure that none of their accounts that they do protest stuff on have nothing in common with their other accounts. I had an air gap for a while, and then I just got lazy with it, and now it's just part of my like larger account that I know that could be like webbed out if anybody.
Have you defined air gap there?
Oh yeah, air gap is that complete separation between your two identities, where you have pseudonyms, like a large list of pseudonyms and a bunch of different sets of names, no overlapping passwords. Like, if you have something that's a two-factor authentication, you might even have different accounts for whatever two-factor authenticator you use, and things to that effect, so that they're not, any one thing doesn't compromise all of it.
Right, absolutely.
This is great. This is absolutely, sorry to interrupt. This is like, this is absolutely dope shit. I love this.
This is going to be one of those episodes where people should be taking notes.
Yeah, I'm taking a lot of notes. The chat, Pep OG, right?
Yeah. So, and then the next thing that we that we're going to want to talk about is the title of this, which is How to Prevent Police Infiltration. Thank you for that, because you know the spoiler for this, because you interviewed me before about this.
I have.
That there is no way to prevent police infiltration.
That is correct.
They are already in our movements. They are already at our protests. They are already in the command structure if you have a hierarchy in your organization.
I set them up and I knock them down. I knew this was coming. It's a funny thing. Like, basically people can be more or less attuned to this kind of stuff, but there's no way you can just be like, we are 100% safe. There are no moles. There are no cops, right? Whatever. Like, I was talking to a friend just yesterday, who was talking about a lot of protest work that she does and how she's like constantly spotting undercover cops from their shoes. Like the cops in her area just like really aren't good at blending in. And that she was just telling a story of like talking to someone whose very young and had just joined and had come to the first event, and saying to other people like, that one's a cop, and saying to the person like, how are you doing, junior junior detective, and they were like, I don't know what you're talking about. And the other people like not believing her that this person was a cop, but like her just being like, well, let's just see where, like, let's just not share anything, let's just, don't tell her anything, and then see where she goes. And then like the next thing she did was, I think they were at a protest. Yeah, they were at a protest. Like, then the next thing she did was go up to the line of police, and then the next thing that happened was the police cattled them all. So
interesting.
it was like, oh yeah, that was a cop. It's like you can be more attuned to this kind of stuff, but there really isn't actually, like, and then that's why it's important to understand this stuff, right, Tia? Because this is like, you can understand how to keep your information safe, your operation safe, but you can't be like, I'm sure 100% that nobody involved has ulterior motives.
Yeah. There's the thing that gets passed around a lot that's especially fun, and it's like, the FBI talking about how difficult it is to infiltrate activist organizations, because the amount of reading that's required is too much, and it's hard to cut off our sources of income because we're all just poor college students. And yeah, what's the source of income? Well, there's no income. It's got a zero operating cost. The only thing that they're wasting is time.
Yes, like, there was a pretty similarly funny, like funny in the same way, but it's not as relevant. So this is a derail, but which was TERFs talking about having tried to infiltrate trans rights activists and understand what they're all like. And it was an amazing report.
The trans lobby.
Yeah. It was an amazing little report to read. Never once did they like it really click and then just go, oh, we're just talking about a disenfranchised, marginalized group of like massively disproportionately under the poverty line, just people, just human beings. But like this report that's like detailing like the transsexual usually doesn't have any kind of drawing room meeting space in their house. And I'm like, yeah, man, because we're not all middle class Guardian writers. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Well, this is I'm loving all this so far. So like you mentioned something before. It's about making sure. So you were saying, because obviously it's impossible to stop cops from getting in the movement, right? Mm-hmm. And you were saying it's about making sure no one involved. Sorry, I totally blanked out. Was it like knows too much? Did you say?
It is. So as soon as let's say a person has done, whether or not a person has done a crime, they are now in police custody. The police have confiscated their cell phone, and it's got the biometric thing, so it just needs their face. Well, now they pointed at your face because they have physically you in custody, and it unlocks. And now they have your Facebook and and your Twitter and your Signal and etc. And they can subpoena the records, or just from your phone, since they have access to it, and use that in a court of law if they want, and all sorts of things like that, and use all of the numbers of all of the people you have in Signal. And which is why the thing is, never bring your cell phone to a protest. Always like Sharpie on the phone numbers you need. But this is why you want it, so that that there's this air gap between your identities, so that if you do have to bring your cell phone, or you weren't planning on being arrested, you weren't planning on being anywhere near the police presence, and they still came for you, or they came for you not at a protest, because retributive policing is a very common thing, especially in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And so you didn't know to leave your cell phone at home that day, and now you're in police custody, etc. So that's why doing the hard work of logging on when you need it and logging off when you're done is
logging off is hard work. I agree.
Can't be done.
Can't be done. Yeah, that's true. But I get what you're getting at. Like, we need to think through that worst case scenario, and if that person gets arrested and then their phone is open and all their contacts are open, and it's fair game legally to the police, does that then bring down your whole operation, or doesn't it? Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, every single step along the way, there are things where, depending on how much work you're putting in on the street, depending on how integral you are to the operation, is how much work you should be putting into these steps and this sort of like shift between and like removal of identity. We called them funny names. Literally, just you fake a different name online than offline, and then maybe even like using pseudonyms in real life, like not using your human name with other people, and that's actually super common.
Yeah. We talked about this in the Squatters episode last week, but if you are in court, you don't have to provide ID. They will need a name to refer to you to refer, you know, to you by, but unless you're fully going into the system, you can actually just say, you know, something that people call you, some nickname or whatever, if you did find yourself like, yeah, you're not required to give ID. At least that's the case in the UK from the Squatters Handbook there, but I don't know the case everywhere. But yeah.
Someone's asking if that's true in the US as well. Is it true in the US?
I do not know the answer to that question, but you can always tell the pigs to go fuck themselves.
There is that too.
Yes.
Tira, I'm really glad that. No, I just want to say that I'm really glad that you pointed out. I caught something what you said earlier, which is even if you weren't planning on getting arrested, and the reason I wanted to point out that small part is I know there's a lot of people watching this right now that, and this happens for so many conversations we have, not just on Red Planet, but just in political streams. A lot of people think that they're viewing things, but it's never going to be their personal problem. And how can you speak to how much people should probably can be considering this as a personal problem that they should care about? Like I know Sophie and we talked about this, it wasn't on Red Planet, but we had a conversation about surveillance and how like, it's not just for like super Antifa super soldier. Like we all have to be very aware of how we are subjected to this surveillance and how we should give a fuck about it, and not just for like pragmatic reasons, but for like almost like ethical reasons, that we shouldn't become comfortable as like a species with like someone else just always being able to look at our genitals whenever they want to look at our genitals and things like that. So anyways, I just wanted to touch on that. I don't know if you had anything to say. If not, that's cool. But like I know there's a lot of people in the chat that are thinking, oh, this is all information that's very cool and stuff, but it doesn't apply to me because I'm not like super hardcore or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm never gonna get arrested for being in Bad Bunny's chat.
Yeah, I mean, like just historically, like you can look at examples of this where lists of people who need to be arrested are pretty constantly and consistently maintained by the state police.
Yeah.
And like just there are instances where it's anybody who's ever spoken in front of a crowd, or anyone who's even been in that kind of crowd who gets put on that list. And anybody who gets identified during an interrogation session, this goes 3, 4, 5 people out. And so and with the amount of overreach they have, they can very easily identify that, okay, this IP is associated with this physical address, 4 people living at that house, 4 captives, like things like that. And our police have the legal power to do a no-knock raid in the entirety of the United States, and I have one of those feelings that the entirety of Europe probably has similar powers, even if they like to say that America is more horrible. And
absolutely. I mean, the UK is like a much more surveilled place than at least most of America. The line I gave on the stream the other day with Nicole was the 2 arguments people use to preserve their cognitive dissonance about surveillance is like, I'm not doing anything wrong, and I don't have any reason to want to challenge the system. Therefore, it's fine that I'm being surveilled. And those 2 arguments still they fundamentally rest on the assumption that the thing that is surveilling you is moral and an arbiter of morality. Because if you're not doing anything wrong, right? That requires the thing that is watching you and deciding whether you're doing something wrong to agree with you about whether you're doing something wrong, right?
Yeah.
And so if you believe that the state is moral, and that's fine for it to surveil you. I don't know what you're doing in this chat.
I was about to say, like, I'm not really sure why you're watching this stream if you're that opinion.
Yeah.
There's a small part of us that kind of feel that way. I think some of us are so de-radicalized or radical, whichever way you want to think of it, that, you know, we're completely rid of that sentiment. But I think a lot of us still have a teeny tiny bit of it. Like, I know that I still have like a teeny tiny bit of that sentiment, that feeling that, oh, well, you know what? There must be some sort of
who can stop a good guy with the state, or a bad guy with the state's a good guy with the state, something like that.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, like but like it's something you have to like train yourself out of, like, consciously.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. Whatever.
So yeah, I mean, this definitely ties into conversations about surveillance. Hopefully we'll get it deeper into it. We've got a couple more hours to get into stuff, but I have a topic that I want to go through first. So, and I'm finding my notes. Sorry.
Do we want to do a tweet?
Yeah, you know the most
to say that we're now.
Oh, another tweet with us all in.
Everyone wants to pose again.
Do you need to pose for it? Okay. Everybody smile for the camera.
Okay, we're good. Cool.
Okay, cool.
Got it.
Found my notes. Right.
Perfect.
Tia, you, I don't know what level of tech expert you consider yourself to be, but you have made tech suggestions to me before, and I've got a few things I want to talk through, which are to do with like using tech alternatives that will be more private. Like, we know obviously that like WhatsApp, while claiming to be encrypted, is owned by Meta and just works in direct collaboration with like the CIA. And you know, Apple likewise say that all of their stuff is protected, and then it's been exposed that they're absolutely not. We can't necessarily advise people to, you know, get phones that aren't made by that don't belong to either Google or Apple, but there are alternatives to. You already mentioned Signal, for example. There are alternatives to like WhatsApp that you can use that do offer good encryption. So, yes. What's like? Would you feel qualified to comment on if I talked through, like, brought up a few different alternative platforms, like the kind of safety levels or whatever?
Yeah. I feel like I would, Signal's the one that I remember specifically. It was good last time I like really was paying attention to that stuff. Wink.
Cool.
And Proton Mail for emails, but all of this is constantly riding on like exploitation, like every 3-letter agency has an exploitation division that is constantly trying to figure out ways into, through, underneath, etc.
Yeah.
And ways to convince people to give themselves backdoors and etc. and things like that.
Yeah,
and so,
absolutely.
And so there are, it's constantly, changing, and you can never really tell what's going to continuously be good. All you can do is hope to frustrate it and make it harder, because every single level of difficulty or encryption is something that's going to take more of your time and be more of a pain in the ass. And that's
yeah. The trade-off between your safety and how much of your own time you're wasting, I guess.
And how much of theirs you're wasting.
True. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's the I think that in a conversation about surveillance, something important to remember is that surveillance is always, or that if it's if it's obeying the law, surveillance works retrospectively. Like, someone has to be, have done something for them to be a big enough deal for state intelligence networks to be paying attention at all in order to blah blah blah, right? Like, the state isn't literally the state hasn't got a guy on every person all the time.
Yes. Yeah. That's correct.
Yeah.
You can get about 10 to 20 people of coverage per person if you're working hard.
Right. I'm just realizing with your experience that it's just gonna be some chilling stuff now. But Yeah, I'm trying to go back into my notes now, and I'm a little afraid. But anyway, I wonder if there's a guy for Red Planet that would whip. Hey, guy, what's up?
Hey, Red Planet guy, what's going on?
So,
real quick, I want to just real quick thank you, It's Socialism or Barbarism. Thank you for the 5 subs. That was very kind of you. It was an hour ago, and it's hard for us to pause because the conversations we have, but I think an hour every hour is a good amount. So thank you so much for the 5 subs. I appreciate it.
So this next section, when I'm saying about taking notes, take some notes.
There will be a quiz.
Tech possibilities. No, there won't be a quiz. But if you're watching and you are invested in organizing something and you want to do it safely, these are some tech possibilities for not doing it on platforms that may already have been compromised by intelligence and by the state. So we already talked about Signal instead of WhatsApp. Any further comment before we move on to
that? Signal instead of instead of Discord too. Like if you're just talking about shit posting, talking about your day, and actually, to be honest, talking about anything physical in your day, probably a bad idea. But if you're shit posting, complaining about your family, talking about theory, do that on Discord. If you're talking about trying to get your friend to come to the protest on Friday, do that on whatever encrypted service you want. And I cannot stress this enough. Do the most encrypted version of whatever that service claims. Don't do something like send a voice message with your all of your exact plans, because very often those aren't encrypted. They're just sent as a recording. And so if it's our SMS is fully encrypted end to end or whatever, then it's sure, send a text. Don't send an image. Don't write a post-it note, take a picture of it. What are you doing? Send a text.
Oh, my one more note before we move on from Signal is that although Signal is end-to-end encrypted, there is keylogging on some phones that people should look into, and it varies. But that the predictive text of your keyboard works on it reading what you're writing all the time, and that is an exploit that has been covered as something that intelligence agencies can use, is what your phone is just writing. And that would allow them to have at least half of a text conversation. So it's worth checking if, sorry, I know this is super vague details. I should have researched this more before doing the show, but this is something that you can switch off, the particular setting to do with your predictive text. I'm very sorry that was so vague. Maybe someone in the chat will hit me with a link later. But besides encryption, there's also models of how data moves around and where data is stored. So the next thing I want to bring up is Matrix or Element. I think Element is a version of Matrix. It's an implementation of Matrix. So basically, Matrix is an alternative to Discord, right? You just said about if you're doing your shit posting or whatever, do it in Discord. But it can be useful to have a space that is like Discord, right? That isn't just a group chat. And what's different about Matrix is that it isn't all is that the instance, the server, when we're talking about a Discord server, that server belongs to Discord, the company. Whereas Matrix is a federated thing where you download the software and you run your own server, which means that everything that would be said on your server and discussed between your pals who are planning to, stop deforestation or something, would be within the physical machine that you could be running yourself, which obviously gives, I think, a huge home advantage in terms of encryption and avoiding exploits. Tyr, any thoughts?
That's one of the reasons why I said don't do it on Discord is because number one, even private Discords are somewhat public. And they're subpoenable records, but it's much harder to get the use that subpoena power for a private thing like Matrix if you're just one node connected to it, as opposed to one of the actual hosting servers. And so that's a good point, or a good thing entirely. But just like with you really can't prevent police infiltration because the police are already doing infiltrating and subverting from the start, right? So, you know, there's still no way to make sure that a space like this is not subverted. So, as always, um, the amount of interest and conflict your group has with the authorities is the amount that you need to be paying attention. And by the time that you're to the point where a matrix is necessary, you know, then you're going to, want to be, be practicing the most rigorous forms of operational information security.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you would say that like still then that space isn't good for necessarily organizing in, or not?
I honestly, the number one place that you should be organizing is in person.
Of course. Yeah.
Because that is the only place where your that cannot be subpoenaed, that cannot be taken, like used by the state's tools to generate or manufacture guild.
Gotcha. Yeah. I brought this up with the hosts, my co-hosts already, but one thing I've been considering is maybe moving Red Planet, possibly moving like our personal server where we like coordinate with guests, and possibly doing this with my Patreon Discord as well, moving to Matrix just to show people how it works and get people used to it, and then people can check it out, and if they want to run their own, then they can. I don't know if I'll do that, but it's a possibility.
Also, LOL at you running Matrix specifically is kind of funny. I don't know if we covered that already, but because we haven't.
That's right, Matrix girl.
Yeah.
True. It's true. So there's a platform called Discourse, which I hadn't heard of before. I don't know if anyone else has. It's kind of forum-like. I don't know. Again, it's kind of a similar alternative to having like a Discord kind of space, and it's also open source. I think it's you running your own instance of it. I'm just naming a few different possibilities here. So there's Discourse, there's Mattermost, and there's Matrix. In particular, people like the implementation called Element. Sorry, I should have said, instead of book recs this week, I don't have any book recs about OpSec and InfoSec and surveillance and stuff. I just have these tech recommendations instead that someone from my Patreon Discord passed along. So I'm just basically talking about different tech options. So there is a software suite called Nextcloud, which could give you the alternative to working in stuff like Google Docs or Office 365, which again, in terms of exploits, like Google Docs, just storing loads and loads of docs and stuff on the cloud, on Google servers. I don't know, not the best possible thing. Not that, as we've already covered, like not that you're organizing should be like a Word document of like all your plans anyway. That's a terrible idea. But just in case you found yourself needing to make a spreadsheet, I feel like Nextcloud is a possibility for people.
If your planning document is a Google Doc, you should rectify that. Remedy that.
Yeah, ideally. And then there's an interesting conversation I think to have about, well, I don't know how long, but it may be interesting, a conversation to have about funding, which is that in the first place, Patreon was conceived as something where people would be able to do activism and other like bold stuff and get money from supporters. But obviously Patreon blew up, and so it's got a lot of corporate interest. It has investors. It's moving towards a more hyper corporate model. So I think, I've got two recommendations here, which are LiberaPay, and they say the two main differences are the only real terms of service they impose are that payments must follow EU financial regulations and cannot be in exchange for goods or services. And two, they don't charge any fees. So that's neat. If people were looking to get supporters and they didn't want to use Patreon or couldn't use Patreon. And then the other one is, this actually isn't a pay thing. This one is a non-profit backed groupware platform called Mobilizon. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Mobilizon.
Mobilize on
Mobilism.
sounds
It's
sounds like the
Mobilizon if people want to look it up. But it sounds like something the Power Rangers would fight. But again, to compare to Mattermost, Discourse, or Matrix/Element, Mobilizon.
Mobilize
I
on,
guess right.
pretty sure.
Mobilize on. Yeah, that's what they're going for. Okay, Mobilize on is another kind of, you self-host your own community, and then you have control over where that all is, which is cool. And I also wanted to bring up Mastodon. Not that it's like secure, but I feel like there's a kind of parallel conversation, where I guess maybe this is for another time. I'm not sure. I wanted to bring up Mastodon just because. So if people don't know, Mastodon is an equivalent to Twitter, where it's a federated system and people are running their own instances of servers. Like I was saying about Matrix before, like someone is running the server rather than it belonging to a company. And it's all completely public. I'm not saying any of this is secure in the slightest. It's a public platform where people are interacting very much like Twitter. But if you wanted to have a hangout spot that was quieter and slower and didn't have everything wrong with it that Twitter has, I feel like in this list of tech recommendations, I may as well shout out Mastodon as well. Hit me up at Sophie from Mars at octodon.social. There you go.
Because I hate Twitter.
Everyone hates Twitter, yeah.
There's
it's
always
a much
those people
smaller, more community-focused experience on Mastodon. It's very nice.
There's always those people that say, "Oh, I like it," and those people should shut up. I hate them. Whatever your weird positive crap, just stop that. I like it here in Toxic Land.
My cishet male friends keep on telling me, actually, posting is fun. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm not allowed to do posting anymore because people get mad at me. Once I grew tits, they didn't let me post anymore.
Well, that can't be right. No, that can't be right.
But it feels like Tia, your broader position on this is like tech maybe isn't like tech solutions maybe aren't that helpful.
My broader position on this is that like you can never rely on any tech solution as a way to get around the fact that surveillance is going to happen, because you never know when they're going to get through and to do it, so you never can really trust it as something that isn't surveilled or isn't later recorded and put onto another server. So like and so you can't you have to act like where you're communicating is currently being read in front of a court, and
yes,
that's
absolutely.
just
okay. That's a good line. That's one of the good, really like small things. Chat, write it down. Always, no matter what.
I try and hold us to.
No matter where you're talking, even if you feel like you found a really secure thing, always talk like your shit's gonna be read back in court. That's cringe me out, and I think of like all the inappropriate things I've written to people. like sexy miss, did you say, which maybe
and then,
with regards to organizing.
15th of July, the defendant said, I hope that you blast out my back walls tonight.
I want you to milk me like a cow's udders or something. Did you say this, ma'am?
You've been going on your stream being like, so how do people make the revolution happen? And I'm like, Nicole, shut the fuck up.
Well, yeah.
Anyway.
Good point.
But this is a journalistic show where we're just reporting on what's going on. We are absolutely in no way organizers. We're just a bunch of streamers hanging out and chatting about stuff.
And I was just joking. I was just making jokes for the record. I'd like to make jokes on my stream. It was just a joke.
Actually, I feel like I should announce this for the sake of chat. The FBI have made a report on the phrases redacted, parody, and in Minecraft. They know about those. They wouldn't have been a good legal defense before, but just so you're aware, the literal FBI has a memo that's like, leftists keep on saying in Minecraft to pretend that they don't mean that they're going to do a thing, and they do mean it.
And it's like, and this is something that I bring up in my stream a lot. because there are people who come into my stream, and obviously I'm not going to mention anyone's names, but they come into my stream and they say things like, Brandon.
Yeah.
Like they come into my stream and they say things like, God, I can't wait to like, I don't even want to say it myself. Like what they say.
Something that is say
something horrific that you could definitely get put in prison for, and it's like, A, you're never gonna do that. You're never gonna do that. You're chatting shit, mate. Do you know what I mean? B, like you're saying that in my chat, and I'm queer, sure, but I'm cis, right? So, I'm a cis guy, and I can only imagine that you're going into like trans people streams, people of color streams, and saying this stuff. And like like Tyr says, imagine that being read back to you in court. Like, yo, did you go into like this person's stream and say like you want to do X to X, like because you said that, like we've got that on you, innit? You know what I mean? And it's not just protecting you; it's about protecting your comrades as well. You know what I mean? Like you can't just be going into people's chats on Twitch saying that. It's absurd.
This is really just I'm just really rewording the imagine it's going to be read in a court thing here. But one, I think, good rule of thumb is like the creators can implement as well as everyone else, like as well as if you're actually organizing. Is I have in my Patreon server for nobody to post about crimes, about crimes they're intending to do, because there is some drug discussion in my server to do with like how we believe that believing in legalization and these kind of discourses, and I'm saying like don't post that you're gonna do a crime, because everybody else right then who's read the message, I'm gonna do this crime in a minute, I'm gonna do this crime tonight, is then to some degree complicit in what you just said you were gonna do. So you have
it's
to
not
remember
just
that
about you and your edginess.
Endangering a whole community.
Right. It's a very important lesson, and especially I think a lot of people on the internet need to hear this. If you're super edgy and you're super like, I don't give a fuck, that's great and all, but some other people do, and you're jeopardizing them by announcing these things around them.
100%.
Also, is the official position of Red Planet that we do not condone crimes. I would like to make sure that everyone knows that. We do discuss them, but we do not condone them.
Yes, for example, we'll be doing this episode about trans DIYing and buying hormones outside of prescribed medicines is illegal. But we are we're reporting on how, as states let people down, they will find other solutions.
And additionally, those laws do change pretty drastically by your jurisdictions, and so some of the techniques might be legal in some places and illegal in others.
Right.
So
true.
Yep.
Yeah. But preview for that episode, the homework is going to be for people to learn how to do injections, because one thing that isn't illegal is administering medicine, and you don't have to know where somebody got medicine, but you can help your pal out with their injection. Anyway.
Oh, yes.
To wrap up,
InfoSec, OpSec.
I want to read a useless's comment because it's a good one. So they're saying to tie it into previous streams, and this is with regards to like trying to get on secure platforms, but still, not just like being irresponsible about it. To tie it into previous streams, you can say, just like when you want to avoid being kettled in a protest, be a moving target within the different encryption services as they become available and are vetted as secure at that period of time. I think it's a pretty good tie-in, right? Yeah. Like just like that, we had that episode on riot strategy or riot tactics, protest riot tactics, and we discussed kettling, where cops do this thing where they just cluster protesters together, and it's not good. One of the ways that you can help prevent that from happening is to never just, always be a moving target. Never just like, don't just stay in one spot and just be at home there, because that's a really easy way to get like, quarantined in somewhere. And so similarly, I suppose we can apply that idea to this in like a virtual sense, I guess. Right?
Well, I really want to treat Tyr as the expert here. So regarding more secure platforms, like, does it still apply what you were saying earlier about wasting someone's time who is intending to surveil you? Like, is that like right? The more
the more effort that they have to do to establish, you know, identity and chronology, and who you know, who is speaking in which context to whom, and who they are in real life versus their whatever, the longer it's going to take them to put together, the further away from useful it will be for them. And
Yes,
so
right. Yeah, that's true. Okay.
and so if you know, go ahead.
The Antifada, thank you for the raid. I really appreciate it. We love
Yeah,
you.
welcome in,
We love
Antifadas. How you
you. We
doing?
love you. We love you.
Oh, Antifada, love the show.
yeah.
Hey guys.
Yeah, they're fantastic. So thank you so much for the raid.
Yeah.
You're joining the conversation. Really great conversation about how to avoid like police infiltration, specifically virtually. So yeah.
So this isn't about advice. This is about having a laugh. This bit, but I remember when Gab got shut down. People found out that to be they had added a feature that was like proving you're a verified patriot, where you could upload like ID documents to show that you were an American. So that if you were getting in arguments about how cool Trump is, then you would have a little badge being like, definitely a patriot. And so when Gab, after January 6th, when Gab was shut down, yeah, they had everybody's like, they had a just direct from like, you know, Cumlord for 2069 saying, I want to do all these violent things to Joe Biden and his dog, and just in the data related to that account is like, actually Cumlord for 2069 is Brian from Tennessee. You know, it was pretty amazing.
Phenomenal dub, to be honest.
Yeah,
wow, a huge L for Brandon from Ohio or wherever he said.
Yeah,
that's really funny. They had to like give their social security number, right, or something.
Oh,
Was that Parlor?
Yeah,
Was that the different Parlor?
Oh, it was Paula. I'm thinking of Paula, not Gab.
Okay, whatever. These are all the same thing. They're all the same type.
Yeah.
Of thing.
Well, that's an interesting thing, and maybe we can steer back around towards the OpSec conversation here. But we have seen mass organizing across huge platforms, which, I mean, firstly is being allowed more because it's right wing, whereas if it was far left, if it was a similar number of far left agitators organizing together on Facebook and Gab and Telegram, got to feel like they wouldn't get as far as January 6th on, you know, organizing through public platforms. But I do think it's interesting to see that, right? Because like that's about mass movements and there being and so many people going there and just being a culture in that space, a very politically skewed culture in that space. And while it's not good to then organize what your plans are, you know, publicly on Parler, on Gab, on Telegram or Facebook, and I'm not advising for anybody to do that at all. I do think it's interesting that we've seen this repeated thing of the far right having their own platforms, and that's part of what I'm talking about with say Mastodon, is that I do think people could get off of Twitter and get into a space where you know reliably that the people you're talking to, you know, all are you know, other lefties, other pinko stinkos. Have your own little anarchist server where you plan nothing. Absolutely nothing, because it's still just a public website where you're just, like, chatting with people, but you know, just hang out. Like I do think that like hanging out there is cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's I think a good way to click this back into OpSec is like, you know, the planning nothing thing is what's the gonna make it, you know, a social space as opposed to a sort of activist or organizing space, right? And you know, the ability to coordinate and plan through something wirelessly shouldn't, you know, we can communicate with each other and plan meetings of when we're actually doing the organizing and doing the plans. Hey, you know, we should, you know, we need to, you know, these are the goals that we want to hit. How do we get people to show up for these goals, etc.? Like those things need to be handled in person anyway for almost all of them. And so, you know, you organize when you're going to have in-person things over there, but don't ever like plan your protest stuff. Don't ever plan your, your messaging, your, anything like that over the internet unless you're prepared to have it read back to you in transcript form. And in the end, a lot of this is going to come down to unless you're willing to have it read back to you as a court transcript, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean also, like, you might say, I'm willing to have this read back to me as a court transcript. You might apply the mindset where you're thinking, all the things I'm saying so let's just take an example for a second, that people are planning to get in the way of a development that would deforest an area and destroy local environment, right? People are planning an illegal action that everybody on Earth would agree is just they're doing a moral thing. Because again, actually, I say this to the NSA agent who's watching Red Planet. The moral conclusion of knowing that climate change is happening is that we should all do as much as we can to stop it. And even I think even the agent watching probably agrees. I think. But anyway, it's about the law, right? It's not about morality. Is my point, right? And so if you're trying to apply this like, everything I'm writing here, I should be okay with this being read in court. Like, it's not about what you think is okay. It is about the law, because like you might be planning to do something which will stop just something fucking horrible, just some awful fucking shit, right?
You and your buddy John Brown might have big plans, but however, comma.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not. It's not about that. It is about the law.
Mm-hmm.
And as you will soon find out, you cannot defeat an enemy that you cannot see.